Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. I'm Jeff Nugent, and I'm so excited about today. We've got a really interesting topic that a lot of people in the contingent workforce space don't really think about because they often just have systems and products and technology just show up and the marketeers and the salespeople sell them to you. But before they get into the salespeople's hands, they have to be developed. And then even after that, as the products evolve, there's a lot of thought that goes into technology. And I'm here with Ravdeep Sawney from Prosperix to talk about product management, the ideas that go into building a technology, and other exciting things that are happening right now that are really going to drive product innovation going forward. So, Ravdeep, so excited to have you on the show today. This is an amazing topic because often you're behind the scenes as the technologist, the product management, the chief product officer of a technology company, and it's taken you years to get to the point that the salesperson's got it in his hand and it looks all shiny. But you're constantly evaluating features and functionality and how it all fits within workflows, etc., and viability of that product. And a lot of people don't see it. So thank you for coming on. And how does, product management work? And, keep it simple for us at first, and then we'll get deeper into it.
Sounds good. So, product management is a big umbrella. And I think what I'll say is, the key to product management is understanding is that all your internal users or departments are your customers first, right? And really, just the theoretical part, it's about, managing the process of planning, developing, and delivering products to market.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple enough, but there's a lot of moving mechanics in it.
Oh, totally. Because you're also running a business, right? At the end of the day, you're building features and functionalities that have viability and usefulness for the clients. In terms of how do you evaluate some of the features and functionalities that come into the product, even when you're starting in the early days, but even during, when you've got a mature product and you're looking at what's next? How do you develop that, roadmap and get features and functionalities that you look at and that you'd work with your tech teams to develop?
Sure. So, as you said, right, different phases of maturity of the company, it's different ways of handling it. And I think, the first point when you're starting with an idea, and just a little bit of background about myself, this is my third startup that I'm involved in. So, initially you've got a problem to solve and you've got to validate it, right? And generally before building, you go out and talk to potential customers. You understand if the problem is large enough to actually go ahead and invest the time and energy to build a product. The other key thing is to then understand is who are the players or the audiences to service this problem. And each audience member in this problem has a different lens on what their pain is. So you start by identifying your user personas, the core problem, and then dissecting that core problem down into smaller nuggets, right? Competitive research, market analysis will tell you, hey, look, this is where I have to start. This is the bare bones of where I need to start. You're building a building, you need a foundation.
Yeah.
Right? Once you have that, and you've got early adopter customers or beta users, however you want to call it, you have a committee of power users who are committed to you and your solution because they feel the pain and they believe it's large enough to warrant their time with you. You then start fine-tuning it. Right? And that's when you start looking at innovation. So in the beginning, you're releasing a product kind of with that 80-20 factor, right? What are the 20% of features that 80% of people consume? Then after you're measuring adoption of that feature set and figuring out where to invest more time, where requires more innovation, and kind of keep feeding back with your customers in a feedback loop to surface up really what the opportunity is. Just giving an idea, my last startup, we started with a completely different philosophy or a hypothesis. I think it was about year 2, we realized what our real value was. And it was through talking to customers. And what we started with and how we actually, got investors with, we realized there was a different opportunity, and it panned out. But point is, talk to your customers, potential customers and market as soon as possible in the process.
Oh no, that's unbelievable advice. And from a program perspective, if I'm a contingent workforce program leader and I'm invested in a product and I see new needs coming up, how am I able to influence the roadmap of some of the technology partners? Because once again, roadmaps tend to be set in frequency basis or longer thought process basis, because it's not overnight you can develop new features or just move buttons around on your technology. How do I work with my technology providers to kind of influence that roadmap as best as I can, or build a better relationship with my technology vendor versus just saying, oh, it's not working, and look for a different system all the time? How do you work with the customers, and how have you worked with customers in the past?
So that's a really interesting point. And I think as a software company, it's different, right? So we don't do custom feature set developments. It's part of does it belong in the core strategy of the product and what we're trying to do? And to answer your question about how do you as a customer kind of build that relationship with your provider is be open about what you need, what you're missing, what you like. Now, not always will the technology vendor be in a position to service every request. I mean, if they do, I think they're spreading themselves too thin. But what we look for is commonality within this voice of the customer committee, our power users, right? And if we start seeing trends of requests within a particular area, we then investigate further. Wait, there's something going on here. We've suddenly gotten 7, 8 requests around this one particular feature set module. And it's about interviewing the customer and understanding. And then first thing is, what is the commonality of that request? Because then it's good it works for the greater good, our entire audience.
And it makes so much sense, and it balances out your cost versus the return of developing that, because your larger group of customers are looking for that, and there's
you've got buy-in and potential users before it even launches, because they're committed to it. You're solving a pain point for them, and that's the kind of validation you need at a certain point. Otherwise, you're developing without understanding if anybody's going to ever consume it.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, the build it and they may come isn't usually the best strategy in software, right?
It isn't, and this is where we're I guess one of the blessings of being the company of our size is we're fairly agile compared to others. I mean, we turn around and we're constantly improving and innovating, right? We listen very carefully to our customers. We are not hesitant to shift priorities down the road if we acknowledge there is an area that needs more investment of our time.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And, for both parties, really. And that's the key. So from a kind of a program perspective, definitely be open and honest. Join voice of customer committees. It sounds like is a great idea to work with your technology vendors to have some influence. And then, quite honestly, be accepting of, hey, I got, certain new features I got, but the other bells and whistles don't really make sense. And from what I've heard, typically a lot of vendors will just say no, or it turns into a customized consulting project over here that you can, but you have to pay for it. But often more and more vendors, given the idea of cloud and the SaaS models, they tend not to want to make customizations because it's harder to maintain.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's an opportunity for us and something that's challenged other companies in our industry for a very long time. You know, they've been they got to the scene far before us when the technology wasn't there to allow them to do what we can do today.
Oh no, for sure. So, we talked about product management, but I know there's a lot of exciting things in the marketplace that you as a product manager, once again, has been tracking, watching, investigating, experimenting with long before you'll see it in the marketplace as a product. So, talk to me about some of the things that you're most excited about and have either started putting into your products or you're looking to put it on the roadmap for future releases of your products.
Sure. I think what's on everybody's mind, especially in 2024, is AI, and it means a lot to many different people, many different things, right? So I think I'm most excited about is our next few releases are actually going to be providing a lot more tools to users to optimize certain mundane tasks that they're constantly doing in our system. And for a company of our size, we've been investing in machine learning and AI for about 5 years now, but not from the generative AI side, which is what most people are excited and touch and feel and play with today. We've been actually looking at it more from the supplier distribution side. So what I'm most excited about this year is releasing some of these things that users can actually touch and consume. So, generative AI for job description, creating interview kits, as well as analyzing resumes beyond words and using that to better match and allocate requisitions, not only to potential candidates, but also to the suppliers that can actually provide the candidate for that requisition. So this year, we've got a couple of big things going on to do with AI.
Yeah, no, and like you said, the idea of AI, and there's so much hype around it, a lot of it has been in the generative space, right? Where it's put in a prompt and get a bunch of content back and make some decisions around things or get that. But like you had said, the whole idea of predictive analytics and those types of things, it's more in the, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the machine learning space, and where the machine is learning based on original logic you have built, and then as it learns, it's learning that logic and it corrects itself to make better decisions as you're monitoring it. How does that work, actually? That would be a great thing to educate me and everybody else out there. Is machine learning is a nice word, but how does it actually work, and how has it been refined, at least at your organization, over the last little bit?
Sure. So I think you nailed it, right? It starts by you defining your model, right? And what are the variables in this model or equation? And you start feeding it data, and you set certain assumptions and weights on these variables. Over time, the machine starts understanding and surfacing, in our case, is certain other attributes we never took into consideration when it comes. Let's just talk about matching jobs to recruiters, which is something we've spent a great deal of time working on, because we have a marketplace of thousands of recruiters. And you can just imagine that even on a single VMS instance, aligning a couple of dozen recruiters to jobs and managing performance, understanding what's working, what's not working, is a sinkhole of time. So we've actually completely automated that on our end. So our marketplace, when a requisition comes in from a client, our algorithm understands which recruiters are best to work on a requisition, but not just looking at what they say they're good at, it's their past performance and the quality of candidates they provided to other similar requisitions in our marketplace. The other thing we look at is their candidate pool capacity. Do they already have candidates existing that can match and align with this job? So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's
No, it's fascinating, and that's some of the things that you've done in specific use cases, right? And how the machine kind of learns and then provides some interesting aspects that you may have not thought of as humans. But generally, in the machine learning, there is monitoring by humans some of the outcomes and then tweaking it along the way.
Absolutely.
So in terms of, around that, there's always some obstacles and fear, I guess, right, of AI. And there's been many articles like the robots are going to take over and things like that that are out there, and concerns. But like some of the obstacles that I've read about are, biases in the AI tools that are out there. And which and or IP, and that tends to be more in the generative space than the machine learning. But can you talk to some of the potential pitfalls of using AI, or the obstacles that may be true, maybe unfounded, that, and how have you handled that, or some of the best practices that you've seen used, that you put in some ideas? I guess what I would say, it's being kind of called responsible AI, right? So that it monitors biases, it monitors outcomes, and corrects along the way. Like how do you handle some of that?
So one thing I'll say is it's about, as you said earlier, right? It's having the ability to understand how decisions are being made versus it's a magic box and we just trust what it does and what it says. So for a very long time, we were testing side by side our algorithms and humans. And even though the data was showing us that what the algorithm would deem as a match or a recommendation, there were better results than the human. But before we kind of trusted it blindly, we really built tools to monitor and understand and surface how is it thinking. So I think the same applies to your question about biases and other problems in the industry is to have tools that can surface up what are these similar patterns and traits of the behavior, the human behavior. And at that point, I think we can surface and see if there are conscious or unconscious biases occurring, or if it's just a matter of, hey, it seems like this company loves graduates from Stanford, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a matter of looking and monitoring and supervising, I think is what the term you used, before you go ahead and unleash this, or at least I think the perception a lot of people have is that it's already unleashed. It isn't, right? It's not running an entire company at the moment, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that from a program perspective, or if I was a buyer of technology, that's what I'd want to ask our vendor about. Like, what controls are there? What controls are you using internally at your group as the technologist? And then are there things that we should be watching for with the outcomes that then we provide the feedback to you, so that there's this open communication on concerns that can be addressed as the machine learns and makes outcomes, right? Have you seen that where the customer is providing the feedback around that, or building councils to monitor things?
Uh, we've heard that companies are want to implement these things more than proactive. I think my experience has been generally is that they're very skeptical, even though we show them the data that look, it's working. They're just skeptical because they don't understand how. So at least at the moment now, what we're doing is exposing a lot of the levers that the machine would use anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a comfort factor. It's what we've realized is that just to have the reports and the analytics is one part, but to be able to understand what are the levers and having some ability of controlling it, I think makes people more comfortable.
Yeah. And that would increase adoption, because with comfort comes adoption. And you're right. It's kind of like, I would almost say, like a professor reading a paper of somebody's, knowing the sources, of how that outcome was made and what the sources of the information came from, and then it becomes more comfortable that they came up with those conclusions or those ideas, right? So
That's right. I think that's a great way of putting it. It's not just the answer is two. It's, hey, it's 1 + 1 is 2.
yeah, and then with that, there's familiarity, and then they'll say move forward with it, right? That's
Absolutely.
interesting on the adoption front. What else is exciting you? So AI is a big one, and I
AI
think
is a big.
it's going to continue to be the big one out there and drive efficiencies. Is it efficiencies? Is it better outcomes? And how are people? And I guess more of a general comment. There's in the product, but how are people using it in their day to day as well?
In terms of AI, sorry, is that correct?
Yeah, using AI in their day to day, like, are you finding they're using it more to start a task, to complete a task, to be kind of an assistant?
Got it.
How are people utilizing it?
So I think in day to day, right? I mean, if we look at many differences, probably the industry that's consuming generative AI the most would be marketing,
Yeah.
right? Everything from content generation to now it's ad creation to landing page creation to microsite creation. So that industry, I think, is probably the earliest adopter or consumer. And there's a lot of parallels if we take marketing into the staffing world, right? I mean, and my background is building a marketing platform. And you know, if you look at it at the end of the day, candidates are leads,
Yeah.
right? Job description pages are landing pages to sign up to buy a product or to join a subscription list. So the same parallels from there can be applied directly into our industry.
Yeah.
It's just candidates are consumers of the job, right?
100%. And often you hear the idea of employer branding or employment brand. Use your employment brands to attract your workers. And some of the best recruitment teams have worked with their marketing departments, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Absolutely.
getting out there. So it's interesting. And
That's
that's
where you're seeing.
they're helpful.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I said, and that's where you're kind of seeing now a lot of that marketing jargon of lead generation being brought into our industry. And that's where you've got nurturing systems, right, which have existed in the traditional sales and marketing world forever. Identify a prospect, generate a content of email, engage the person, bring them in, and nurture them along a drip campaign. So all that same methodology is being applied or can be applied directly into our industry.
No, it's fascinating. It continues to evolve, right? And I think over the next few years, you'll have your hands full on deciding what features and functionality need to go into different systems and the systems that you're using at Prosperix, right? And you're providing to your customers. So
Absolutely. Customers will help us surface where to spend the energy.
that's always the way. So I can't thank you enough for taking your time today away from your product and the development teams to kind of give us more insight in how you build technology. And because you always see it at the end, but there's so much that goes into it and so much thought that goes into it as well. So I really, really thank you for sitting down with me today.
It's my pleasure, Jeff.
Awesome. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.